In today's video, we're going to be painting up a female Orc Shaman from Reaper Miniatures. Okay, so the first thing you want to do with Reaper Miniatures, you want to make sure you give them a good wash in some nice soapy water and give them a coat of primer. So I've just gone with some white here, and then we're going to start on the model. So I'm starting off with some greenskin here for our Orc's flesh, and you can see that I've just thinned the paint down just a little bit with a touch of water so we can get into all those nooks and crannies over the miniature and really get into all those little bits of detail, while also keeping a smooth kind of consistency when we apply a second layer. Because applying the second layer is really going to be, even a third layer if you need to, is going to avoid a lot of these streaks, like you can see here that I have a lot of streaks on that, but adding in that second and third layer will really smooth those out. Okay, so once we've completed the skin on the orc and it's all dried up, we're going to move on with some ivory now. And what we're going to be doing with this ivory is we're going to be using it to be painting in our orc's eye. So she does have two eyes, but we're only going to be painting the one because the other one's basically completely covered up by the hood and shadow. So I'm just going to be leaving that one, and we're just going to be focusing on this eye here that you can see. Okay, so now we have our eye all done in an outline. We're going to come in now with some black, and we'll be using black for the pupil, of course. Now this is always a nice and tricky step that I'm still trying to work on myself, and I'm just going to be using a very fine tip brush here and just carefully dotting it in, making it look as neat as I can in the process. Then once we have our eye complete, what we're going to be doing is moving back in with some ivory now, and we're just going to be using it to just pick out her tusks that are slightly poking out of her mouth there, so we want to make sure we get that. Again, using that same fine tip brush we use for the eye to do on. So just carefully picking it out with the very tip of the brush. Okay, now with that face complete, we're going to be moving on to her hair now. So I'm going to use some black here, because I just want to have some nice dark black hair that's going to contrast against some of these other colors that we're going to be placing on here a bit later on. So just grabbing the black and giving a nice coat to the hair on here, and also I've got this nice fine brush so I can just pick out some of the hair underneath her hood that's covering up the hair as well. Okay, so now with her hair all painted up, what we're going to be doing now is moving on with some vampire red. And we'll be using a lot of this because we're going to be using this to be painting up all of her cloak and robes that she's wearing. So now red is a notorious color for being very hard to paint on in one layer, especially getting it a nice smooth even coat of it. So we're definitely going to have to use multiple layers to do this, and I have again thinned the paint down a little bit so it can get into all those ripples and waves in the cloak there, and we can get a nice overall coverage, waiting for it to dry and then coming in with a second and third coat as needed as well. So don't forget to give that a nice good all overall effect, and you'll really bring out your reds when you add in multiple layers. Okay, now with our robes all picked out, what we're going to be doing is moving on with some skeleton bone now. And of course I'm going to be using the skeleton bone to be painting up the skull that she has in her hand. So giving the skull just a nice coat there, being a little bit careful to avoid the places where her fingers are touching the skull, because she actually has her hand inside the skull. So just being a little bit careful there as well while you're picking out the skull. Okay, now we have our skull complete. What we're going to be doing is we're going to move on now with some oak brown. And we'll be using oak brown to be painting up her staff that she has in her hand. So we want this nice wooden staff, especially since she's ogre shaman. She's got this very crude sort of look to her with the skull in one hand and this nice handmade staff in there. So we want to make sure we give that its proper effect by making it look like a dark natural wood. So that's why I went with the oak brown here. Okay, so now we have her staff painted up. We're going to come in now with some fur brown. I'm going to be using fur brown to be painting the leather armor she's wearing. So she's wearing sort of like this leather bikini type thing, as well as she has some armbands on her as well. So we want to be painting them up with the fur brown. The fur brown has sort of a reddish tone in it as well, so it's going to stick out amongst the brown that we already have on here, and as well tie in a little bit to the robes she's wearing too. So that's why I'm going with the fur brown. Okay, so once all those leather areas are picked out, what we're going to be doing now is moving back in with some ivory, and we're going to be using this to be painting up this little part on the staff here. Now, maybe a little bit hard to see on camera, but these are actually little feathers that are placed on here. Now, you may want to do these in a variety of colors. The sculpting on there is a little bit hard to tell. There's also very little like bone of a lizard or something on there as well. So giving it a nice covering, and this is going to really make it stand out a little bit once we apply the washes to it. Okay, so now what we're doing is we're going to come back in with some leather brown here, and what I'm going to be doing with this is our Orc Shaman here actually has a little dagger just on the side of her here. So I'm just going to be doing the holder for that dagger. We're just going to be painting that in the leather brown as well to match all the other areas of leather brown that we have in here, so all that leather ties together as well. So just don't forget about this little bit when you're doing the leather parts. Okay, so once that's all complete, what we're going to be doing now is moving on with some alien purple. I'm going to be using the alien purple to be painting that nice crystal she has at the top of her staff. She's got this really nice embedded giant crystal on the top of her staff, which seems to be the source of her magic power, I guess. So we want to make sure we emphasize that with a nice strong color that's going to pop out against all the colors we've had on here already. So our alien purple is a good choice for that. Okay, so now with her crystal painted up, what we're going to be doing is we're going to come in now with some mythical orange. And we'll be using this mythical orange to be painting up this, she has sort of like a engraved gourd here, or this sort of special pouch type thing that's hanging off her staff as well. We're going to be painting that in orange. It's going to be another standout thing with the orange here, so we can really attract our eyes all over the miniature with that. So that's why I've gone with the orange for this part of the miniature. Okay, so once that's all painted up, what we're going to be doing now is we're going to move on with some oily steel. And we'll be using the oily steel to just be painting the crossguard and the rest of her dagger that she has here. So we want to get the nice handle in there and a little bit of crossguard on there. We just want to paint that in. So we've got a nice little bit of metallic to pop out on the miniature as well. Just something else to look at all over the miniature. Okay, so with all that complete, we're going to be doing some basing now. And I've just placed it onto an ordinary base. Got some PVA glue here, and I'm just sprinkling some sand that I've gotten from my driveway, and just giving it a nice good overall coating with that to give it off that nice ground texture, including dropping it into the miniature to really get that good coveraging on there, and just being careful to avoid getting the glue on anywhere else and it's just staying on the base. Okay, so once that's all completely dry, I've just placed some more primer back over top of it, and now I'm going to come in with a uniform grey. So we can now paint up our ground base as well. It'll probably take a little while to dry up, especially since we've got some PVA glue on there. You might want to use something faster like Mod Podge or super glue even, but PVA glue was what I had on hand. So definitely make sure that's nice and dry before you move on to the priming step and then painting on top of that. Otherwise it can become a muddy mess. So all we're going to be doing now is just covering it all up in that nice uniform grey. Okay, now with that base all done and completed, what we're going to be doing now is we're going to move on with some purple tone. And we'll be using purple tone, of course, to just be dolloping it over top of our nice purple gem. So we want to make sure you get a good coverage with that, and be careful of it pooling, because we don't want the purple wash to run down the end of the staff as well. So just remember to avoid that. Okay, so with that completely dry, what we're going to do now is move on with some seraphim sepia. And we're just going to be using seraphim sepia on one part of the miniature, and that's our skull here to give it that realistic skull effect, which I think seraphim sepia is really good on bones for doing that, making it look very realistic. So just adding that on there, nice quick step in there. And don't forget to really get it in there in the eyes and the teeth to really bring out those details as well. Okay, so with that complete, what we're going to be doing now is moving on with some flesh wash. And we're going to be using flesh wash to, of course, be covering our orc's flesh. Now, I've gone with a flesh wash here rather than a green wash, because I want her to look, in my eyes, a little bit more like a realistic skin tone. Sort of ties it a little bit closer to human and stuff like that. But by all means, you could go with a green tone here to really bring out the green into the orc and really pop out amongst all the colors we've got here. But I'm sort of trying to go for a realistic sort of skin texture, and I think the flesh wash is going to help with that a little bit more than with the green, making it look like a standout monster. I want it to be also a realistic thing if I can try and accomplish that. So that's why I've gone with flesh tone here. Okay, so once that flesh wash is all completely dry, what we're going to do now is move on to some agrax earthshade. Now, for the agrax earthshade, we're pretty much going to be covering the entirety of the rest of the miniature here. So we want to be going over the nice red cloak, the ground, her leather areas, the staff. We want to make sure we pretty much cover everything we haven't already covered in some sort of wash. I also forgot to mention too, with more on the seraphim sepia, I also did the feathers and the little bit of bone on her staff as well. So don't forget to use your seraphim sepia there at that time as well. So making sure we give everywhere a nice good heavy coat with the agrax earthshade. I want it to be nice and dark. I didn't go with known oil here because I didn't want it to be super dark and taint too much of the red color. I want it to more look like she's you've seen her out in the wilderness and she's a little bit dirty. So that's why I've gone with the brown wash rather than the black. Okay, so now with all those washes completely dry, we're going to come back in now with some dragon red. I'm going to be using dragon red to be picking out all the high spots on our miniature here where the sun would naturally catch all these high points, and we want to give them just a nice thin coat of the red here to tie them in together and make it look like we've got some nice highlights going on the miniature. So you can see here where I'm just picking out some areas where the folds are really predominant and pronounced and they really stick out. So it's a nice miniature to practice your highlighting on. I still need a lot of practice on highlighting, so this is a good miniature for that as well. Okay, so once we have those red highlights all nice and complete, we're going to move on now with some alien purple, and I'm just going to be mixing it with just a touch of ivory here to get that slightly lighter purple color. And I'm just going to be catching the edges here on the gem so we can really get that crystal looking nice, like the sun's going to start shining through it. And now with that gem all complete, we're going to move back in now with some goblin green. And we're using goblin green to be highlighting our skin on our Orc Shaman here. And this miniature is, like I said, quite good for picking out highlights because it has some really nice predominant ones that really stick out. So you can see here on the chest, she's got some nice ab muscles that really stick out. She's got some really big leg muscles. So you can see it's quite a good teaching tool for someone who's still getting used to doing highlighting like I am, or even for you. This can be a nice model for that. So we want to pick out all those nice raised areas where the sun is naturally going to look like it's going to hit the miniature to give off that nice highlighted effect as well. And with that, we're finished painting up our female Orc Shaman from Reaper Miniatures. I'd like to thank you all for watching, and as you can see, this video was good for showing off some highlighting here. I'm still new to doing highlighting as well, so I think this miniature is a great place to start if you want to practice your highlighting with those nice big folds and big predominant areas like the muscles on the miniature for this. So it's a great learning tool in here, whether you enjoy me watching me paint up some of these miniatures or you like to follow along and try and copy what I do here. So I'd like to thank you all again for watching, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next video.